Once upon a time, in the beautiful city of Asaba, lived a boy named Afam. He was raised by his grandmother after his mom died while giving birth to him. His grandmother loved him so dearly and didn't want him to miss his mother, so she never scolded him or corrected him while he was very little. Because of this, Afam grew up to be very stubborn, rude, wicked, and disrespectful. Even his own grandmother, the one who loved him the most, suffered because of his wickedness. "Mama, I want chicken for dinner," he would demand. "But my son, we don't have money for chicken today," she will reply gently. "I don't care. If I don't eat chicken today, I will not eat at all." Then he will storm out of the house, leaving her in tears. Afam would stay out of the house for days, leaving his grandmother worried sick about his whereabouts. She would cry herself to sleep every night, praying that her grandson will change. But Afam was not ready to change. It was a case of one day, one trouble with Afam. As Afam grew older, his wickedness only got worse. He was no longer a boy. He was now a young man, but his heart remained cruel. At the market one morning, he snatched some akara from the basket of an old woman selling akara. The old woman pleaded with him. "My son, you have not paid for the akara." If I don't pay, what will you do? You cannot do more than a dead rat, old woman," he shouted back at her. The old woman tried to hold his clothes so he doesn't go without pay. Then he carried the basket and poured the remaining akara on the ground, laughing. And the old woman fell down on her knees and wept. The old woman, in tears, placed a curse on him, saying, "This your wickedness will get you into trouble, and it will be difficult for you to come out of it." Other people in the market that morning stood by the corner, shaking their head in pity for Afam. They were so scared to interfere in the matter, fearing that Afam might also scatter their wares. People feared Afam and avoided his trouble. Afam believed he was untouchable because he rolled with the bad gangs of the city, keeping late nights, drinking and smoking. On several occasions, Afam stole his grandmother's money to buy drinks and gamble with his friends. His grandmother one day was searching for the money she kept under her bed to buy her monthly drugs. And she asked Afam, "Did you take the money I kept under the bed?" "Which money? Why are you asking me?" he replied. "My son, I am asking you because it's just you and I that lives in this house," his grandmother replied him. Afam stood up in anger and shouted at her, "If you ask me about any money again, you will have yourself to blame this evening. People are talking about money. You are here talking about chicken change." He stormed out of the house and did not return that night. Afam had no iota of kindness in his heart. One evening, he saw some beggars sitting by the roadside. He threw stones at them and shouted, "Lazy people, go and walk." Another day, he saw a crippled boy trying to cross the road. Instead of helping, Afam pushed the boy down and said, "Maybe you should crawl like a lizard." He mocked and started laughing. One fateful night, Afam and his gang dared each other to visit the mortuary. It was a place no one liked to go near because the villagers believed that spirits wandered there at night. "Guys, please, let's not go there," said Obinna. "I overheard my father saying it's a sacred place and that the dead needs to be respected because when disrespected, they can be dangerous." But Afam laughed. "I fear nothing, not even the dead." They sneaked into the mortuary, their hearts beating fast. But Afam was not afraid. He walked straight to one of the tables where a body laid, covered with white cloth. He pulled the cloth away. It was the body of a young woman. She had once been beautiful, but death had stolen the life from her face. Afam grinned. Look at her. Even in death, she's still forming fine girl." The other boys shifted backwards uncomfortably. "Afam, Let's go, one of them whispered. This place is not good. But Afam ignored them completely. He touched the dead girl's face, poked her cheeks, and laughed. Then he did something terrible. He touched her breast, mocking her, saying, "See how she's just lying down like a koroko fish." Suddenly, the mortuary attendant appeared. He was an old man with knowing eyes. His voice thundered through the room. "Young men, leave this place at once!" But Afam laughed and said, "What can you do? Can you even beat us? Please leave us alone." The old man's eyes darkened. "You have mocked the dead, and you will definitely reap the consequences." Afam scoffed and walked away. He did not know that his life would never be the same again. That night, Afam could not sleep. At first, he heard whispers and soft voices calling his name. Then he saw shadows moving in his room, and then she appeared. The dead lady from the mortuary stood at the foot of his bed. Her white cloth wrapped around her. Her eyes were hollow and black. Afam was terrified. She pointed at Afam's neck, and he felt a tight grip on his neck. Afam tried to scream, but no sound came out. He had lost his voice. As the lady disappeared, he started feeling his body itch. He scratched and scratched, but the itches only got worse. His body began to burn, and by the next morning, he had boils and sores all over his body. He could not move. His grandmother wept as she held onto him in pity. "What happened to you, Afam? Who did this to you? Who did you offend?" But Afam could not say a word. His grandmother wept bitterly. She called the best herbalists in the village, but no medicine worked. Afam's friends came to visit him. They whispered to themselves, "We warned Afam, but he would not listen. Now look at what has happened to him." It was from their conversation that Afam's grandmother got to know what happened to Afam. One evening, an old woman called Mama Ejima came to their house. She looked at Afam and shook her head. "My sister, this is not an ordinary sickness at all," she said. "Take him back to the mortuary attendant. Maybe he can help." Afam's grandmother carried him to the mortuary. The old attendant was sitting outside. "Ah, this is beyond me," he said, "but I know somebody who can help." He led them deep into the forest to the house of a powerful seer. The seer studied Afam and nodded gravely. "The spirit of the girl seeks justice," he said. "She had no family, no one to speak for her. She died in sorrow and loneliness, and she is angry. The boy must marry her." Afam's grandmother gasped. "Hey, whoa, marry a dead girl?" "Yes," the seer said. "Only then will he be free." The dead girl came from a distant village where life was cruel to her. Her parents had died when she was young, leaving her with no one to care for her. Instead of helping her, the villagers accused her of being cursed. They banished her from the village, chasing her away with sticks and stones. She walked for days, hungry and alone, until she reached Asa. But even here, no one helped her. One cold night, with no strength left, she collapsed near the village square and never woke up again. She died not as a happy person, but as a soul full of sadness, pain, and bitterness. And it's the bitterness that followed her even in death. After listening to the seer, Afam's grandmother agreed. A small ceremony was performed. Offerings were made as they buried the girl. Afam, barely able to stand, was dressed in white and made to swear loyalty to the spirits he had offended. As soon as the final words were spoken, a strong wind blew through the trees, and Afam collapsed. And when he woke up, his sores and boils were gone. His voice had returned. and Afam was not the same again. Afam was no longer wicked. He no longer insulted elders. He no longer mocked the poor. He no longer hurt the weak. He went from house to house, apologizing to those he had wronged. He went to the market and apologized to the old woman he had poured her akara away. He offered her some money, saying, "Mama, I am sorry for what I did to you the other day. Here is the money for the akara." The old woman forgave him and prayed for him. He begged for forgiveness from the beggars he had thrown stones at. And every market day, he walked to the cemetery where he laid fresh flowers on the grave of his ghostly wife. The village of Asaba never forgot the story of Afam, the young boy who mocked a dead girl and became her groom. The lesson to be learned from the story is that every action has its consequences. Afam's rude behavior resulted in a curse that almost cost him his life. Afam's transformation into a kind and humble man shows that people can change if only they can acknowledge and repent from their wrongs. Thank you for watching. See you in my next story. Bye.